The mansion stood silent, except for the sound of cruel laughter echoing through marble halls. Emma Rodriguez had learned to move like a ghost through these rooms, invisible to the men who ruled from the shadows. But tonight, her name was being thrown around like currency in a game she never agreed to play. Julian Valente, the man whose word could end lives, had just accepted a bet that would drag her from the background into a spotlight she never wanted. What began as a joke was about to become something far more dangerous. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. I want to see how far Emma's story travels. The kitchen at the Valente estate smelled like rosemary and old money. Emma kept her eyes down as she arranged imported cheeses on a silver platter, the kind of thing that costs more than she made in a month. Through the doorway, she could hear them. Julian's inner circle. Men whose names appeared in business magazines but whose real work happened in rooms with no windows. She's actually quite sharp, you know. That was Marcus, Julian's right hand. His voice carried the lazy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. I saw her reading Tolstoy in the break room last week. Laughter rippled through the room. A maid reading Russian literature? Victor's voice dripped mockery. What's next? The gardener doing quantum physics? Emma's hands didn't shake. She'd learned that trick years ago. Keep moving, stay quiet, survive. I'm serious, Marcus continued. She could picture him leaning back in one of those leather chairs that cost more than a car. She's probably smarter than half the women you bring to these things, Julian. The room went quiet. Emma felt something shift in the air, the way you can sense a storm before the first drop of rain. Julian Valente didn't respond right away. He never did. The man operated on his own timeline, made people wait just to remind them who held the power. Emma had been working in his house for 2 years and had maybe exchanged 50 words with him total. He looked through her the way you look through glass. That's an interesting theory, Julian said finally. His voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of voice that made people lean in to listen. But intelligence requires more than reading books you don't understand. More laughter, but nervous now. They were waiting to see where he'd land. Emma finished with the cheese and moved to the wine. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, had taught her the hierarchy of bottles, which vintages to breathe and which to serve cold. Emma didn't drink, couldn't afford to, not on her salary, not with her goals, but she knew more about wine than most of the people drinking it in the next room. Prove it then, someone said. That was Anthony, always pushing, always testing limits. Bring her to the Whitmore Gala next month. The suggestion landed like a brick through a window. Excuse me? Julian's voice held an edge now. You heard me. If she's so intelligent, let her navigate a room full of actual power players. See how that Russian literature holds up when she's sitting next to a senator's wife. Emma's heart kicked against her ribs, but she kept her face neutral, kept pouring wine into the crystal decanter. The Whitmore Gala was legend even among the staff. Old money, new money, and the people who decided which was which, the kind of event where a wrong word could end a career. That's absurd, Julian said, but something in his tone had changed. He sounded defensive. Is it? Anthony pressed. I'll make it worth your while. 10,000 says she can't last an hour without embarrassing herself. Or you. 20 says she doesn't make it past the entrance, Victor added. The room erupted in voices, men throwing numbers around, turning Emma into a commodity without ever seeing her face. She stood in the kitchen, wine bottle in hand, and felt something cold settle in her chest. This was what she was to them. Entertainment. A joke to make the evening more interesting. Enough! Julian's voice cut through the noise like a blade. This is beneath us. Emma should have felt relief. Instead, she felt Marcus's voice slice through the silence. Is it beneath us? Or are you just afraid she'll prove us right about the kind of women you usually bring around? The silence that followed was different. Dangerous. Emma had seen Julian angry before. She'd watched him tear apart business partners over the phone, had seen grown men leave his office looking like they'd aged 10 years. But she'd never heard him angry at his own people. You want to make this a bet? Julian's voice was soft now, which somehow made it worse. Fine, I'll bring her. But when she walks into that gala and holds her own, each of you owes me 50,000. And an apology. Deal, Anthony said immediately. Emma set down the wine bottle before her hands could betray her. She should walk away. should go back to her room in the staff quarters and pretend she hadn't heard any of it. But her feet stayed planted on the tile floor, and some part of her, the part that had clawed its way through night classes and community college courses, wanted to see where this went. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her face carefully blank. "Emma, they need more ice." It was a rescue mission disguised as an order. Emma nodded and moved toward the freezer, grateful for the excuse to turn her back on the dining room and the men who'd just turned her life into a wager. "Did you hear?" Mrs. Chen whispered once they were alone in the pantry. "Hard not to." The older woman's face creased with worry. "You should talk to him. Tell Mr. Valente you won't do it." "Would it matter?" Mrs. Chen didn't answer, which was answer enough. Emma had learned early that life was something that happened to you, not with you. Her father had died when she was 12, leaving her mother with 3 kids and medical debt that swallowed everything. Emma had been working since she was 14, under the table at first, legal later, always in the background, always invisible. The Valente position had been a miracle, the kind of salary that let her actually save money, actually imagine a future beyond survival. And now these men wanted to play games with it. "What are you going to do?" Mrs. Chen asked. Emma thought about the night classes she'd been taking at the community college. Introduction to Business, Accounting Fundamentals. She'd aced both, studying in the staff break room after 14-hour shifts. She thought about the books she'd bought at thrift stores, the ones she read on her lunch breaks while the other staff watched soap operas. "I'm going to that gala," she said quietly. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. "Emma!" "And I'm going to make them regret it." 3 weeks. That's how long Emma had to prepare for an event that people in Julian's world spent months planning for. 3 weeks to learn how to navigate a room designed to chew up and spit out people exactly like her. The first week, nothing happened. Julian didn't summon her, didn't acknowledge what had occurred in his dining room. Emma went about her work, cleaning rooms that never seemed to get dirty, preparing meals that cost more than her monthly rent, staying invisible. Then Mrs. Chen appeared in her room one evening with a business card. "Mr. Valente's stylist," the older woman said, pressing it into Emma's hand like it might explode. "You have an appointment tomorrow at 10. Emma stared at the embossed lettering. Vivienne Laurent, Madison Avenue address. "I'm working tomorrow at 10. "Not anymore. You're on a different assignment now." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Emma wasn't a housemaid anymore. She was a project. The stylist's studio occupied the top floor of a building that probably cost more than Emma would earn in a lifetime. Vivienne herself was 60, French, and terrifying in the way only truly competent people can be. She walked around Emma in a slow circle, making small noises of assessment that could have been approval or disdain. "You have good bones," Vivienne said finally, "but we'll need to do something about—" She gestured vaguely at all of Emma, everything else. Over the next 2 hours, Emma was measured, photographed, and studied like a specimen. Vivienne made notes in a leather journal, speaking rapid French into her phone, occasionally asking Emma questions that felt like tests. "What do you think of the color red?" "Depends on the context." Vivienne's eyebrow arched. "Elaborate." "Red wine is sophisticated. Red lipstick is bold. Red flags are warnings." Emma met the woman's eyes. "Everything depends on context." For the first time, Vivienne smiled. "You'll do?" The dresses arrived a week later. Not one dress, 6, each more expensive than Emma's entire wardrobe combined. Vivienne had included notes with each, explaining the strategy behind the choices. The black one for if Emma wanted to disappear, the blue for if she wanted to be remembered, the gold for if she wanted to win. Emma hung them in her closet and tried not to think about the fact that she was being dressed up like a doll for men who saw her as a punchline. The second week brought a different kind of education. Julian's etiquette coach, a woman named Patricia, who'd worked with actual royalty, showed up at the estate and subjected Emma to 8-hour days of instruction that felt more like interrogation. "Which fork?" "The smaller one on the outside." "Wrong. The oyster fork." Again, they practiced conversation, small talk, the art of deflection. Patricia threw scenarios at her like grenades, inappropriate questions, subtle insults, the kind of social warfare that happened in whispers and pointed glances. "Senator Morrison's wife will ask about your family," Patricia said during one session. She's known for it. Makes new people uncomfortable. So I lie. You redirect. Family is a beautiful topic. I'd love to hear about yours first. Then you let them talk. People like nothing more than the sound of their own voice. Emma absorbed it all, taking notes in the margins of her textbooks, cross-referencing etiquette rules with the psychology classes she'd been taking online. It was all manipulation, really. Different techniques, same goal. Make people feel what you want them to feel. She was good at it. By the third week, something had shifted. The other staff noticed it first, the way Emma carried herself, the way she spoke. She hadn't changed exactly, but she'd stopped hiding, stopped making herself small. "You're different," Maria, one of the other housemaids, said one afternoon. Emma was reading in the break room a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. Same person, different context. "That's what I mean. You sound like one of them now." Emma closed the book. "I sound like myself. Maybe that's the problem." The night before the gala, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed in the staff quarters, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere above, Julian Valente was probably sleeping in a bed that cost more than she'd make in 5 years. Did he think about her? About the bet he'd made? Or was she just another piece in whatever game he was playing with his friends? She thought about her mother working double shifts at the hospital to keep food on the table. Thought about her younger brother, who dropped out of high school to work construction. Thought about her sister, brilliant and angry, who joined the military because it was the only way to pay for college. They were survivors, all of them. They didn't quit. Emma got out of bed and pulled the gold dress from her closet. Vivian had been right about the color. It caught light like armor, made Emma look like she belonged somewhere important. She hung it on the door and went back to bed. Tomorrow, she'd show them what invisible really looked like. The day of the gala arrived wrapped in spring sunlight and Emma's carefully controlled panic. She reported for work as usual, muscle memory, routine, before Mrs. Chen found her in the kitchen and pulled her aside. "Mr. Valente wants to see you, his office, now." Emma had been in Julian's office exactly once, when she'd first been hired. It looked the same, dark wood, expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Julian sat behind his desk, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, looking at his phone with the kind of focus most people reserve for surgery. He glanced up when she entered. "Close the door." Emma did. The click of the latch felt final. "I assume you know why you're here," Julian said. "The gala." The gala. He set down his phone, giving her his full attention for maybe the first time since she'd started working for him. "Let's be clear about something. This isn't about you. It's about them, my associates, their egos, their need to turn everything into a competition." "I understand." "Do you?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her the way you might study a chess piece before making a move. "Because once you walk into that event on my arm, you become part of a narrative you didn't write. People will make assumptions, they'll draw conclusions, and most of those conclusions will be unkind." Emma held his gaze. "They already make assumptions about me. At least this way I get to prove them wrong." Something flickered across Julian's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Patricia says you're a fast learner." "I've had to be." "The rules are simple. Stay close. Don't engage with anyone I don't introduce you to first. If someone asks you a question you don't want to answer, smile and change the subject. And for the love of—" He caught himself. "Don't mention that you work for me." "What should I say I do?" "You're a graduate student. Business administration. It's close enough to the truth." Emma thought about her community college classes, the ones she paid for with money saved from paychecks that barely covered rent. "That's not exactly—" "It's what you will be," Julian cut in. "If you play this right tonight, if you survive this idiotic bet without destroying both our reputations, I'll pay for you to finish your degree. Any school you want." The words hit her like cold water. "Why would you do that?" "Because I don't make bets I plan to lose." He stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced precision. "The car leaves at 7. Vivian will be here at 5 to help you prepare. Don't be late." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Emma? Everything you've learned in the past 3 weeks. The etiquette, the small talk, the way to hold a wine glass, forget half of it. The people at this gala aren't impressed by perfection. They're looking for authenticity. Be smart. Be yourself. That's what will surprise them." Then he was gone, leaving Emma alone in an office that smelled like expensive cologne and old leather. Vivian arrived at 5 on the dot, along with a hairstylist and makeup artist who treated Emma's transformation like a military operation. They worked in silence, efficient and focused, turning her from housemaid to something else entirely. The gold dress fit perfectly. Vivian had been right about everything: the color, the cut, the way it moved when Emma walked. The heels were uncomfortable but manageable. The jewelry was borrowed, insured for more than Emma's life was probably worth. "Remember," Vivian said, making final adjustments to Emma's hair, "you belong there as much as anyone else. The moment you believe otherwise, everyone else will too." At 7 exactly, Emma descended the main staircase of the Valente estate. The staff had gathered to watch: Mrs. Chen, Maria, even the groundskeeper. They stared at her like she was a stranger wearing Emma's face. Julian waited at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You'll do," he said finally. The car was a black Mercedes that smelled like new leather and money. A driver Emma didn't recognize held the door open. Julian climbed in after her, maintaining careful distance on the seat. They drove in silence through the city, watching buildings give way to estates. Estates give way to the kind of property that required armed guards at the gates. The Whitmore mansion sat on 20 acres of manicured grounds, lit up like a palace. Cars lined up in front like supplicants waiting for an audience. "Last chance to back out," Julian said as they pulled into the queue. Emma thought about her mother's medical bills, her brother's calloused hands, her sister's angry letters from overseas. She thought about every time someone had looked through her like she didn't exist, every time she'd been underestimated, every time she'd been told to stay in her lane. "I don't back out," she said. Julian almost smiled. "Good." The car stopped. The door opened. Emma took Julian's offered arm and stepped out into a world that had never been meant for her. The entrance hall of the Whitmore mansion could have held Emma's entire apartment building. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that belonged in museums. People moved through it like they owned the place, and maybe they did, or knew people who did, or were people who made owning places possible. Emma felt every eye turned toward her, felt the weight of judgment, curiosity, confusion. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why was Julian Valente, the man who dated supermodels and heiresses, walking in with someone nobody recognized? "Breathe," Julian murmured, so quiet only she could hear. Emma breathed. They moved into the ballroom, and Emma's training kicked in like muscle memory. Smile, posture, eye contact. She let Julian guide her through the crowd, introducing her to people whose names she recognized from newspapers and financial shows. Senator Morrison and his wife. The tech CEO whose company had just gone public. The philanthropist who donated a wing to the hospital where Emma's mother worked. "Emma Rodriguez," Julian said each time. "Graduate student, business administration." And every time Emma smiled and shook hands and made small talk that felt like walking a tightrope. The weather, the venue, the food. Surface conversations that revealed nothing and meant everything. Then Marcus appeared, flanked by Victor and Anthony. They looked at Emma the way wolves look at something they're not quite sure they can eat. "Julian," Marcus said smoothly, "and Emma, you look different." "Context," Emma said, meeting his eyes. "Everything looks different in the right light." Victor laughed, the sound sharp and uncertain. "Been practicing that line?" "No." Emma accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter, held it the way Patricia had taught her, and didn't drink. "But I've been practicing reading people who think they're harder to read than they are." The smile slipped from Victor's face. "Gentlemen," Julian said, his voice carrying a warning. "We're here to enjoy the evening, not to—" "Of course," Anthony cut in, raising his own glass, "to enjoying the evening, and to surprises." They drifted away, but Emma could feel their eyes on her, watching, waiting for her to stumble. She didn't plan to give them the satisfaction. The next hour passed in a blur of conversations and careful navigation. Emma talked to a federal judge about criminal justice reform, drawing on research she'd done for a sociology paper. She discussed market trends with an investment banker, using information she'd absorbed from business magazines she read in the staff break room. She even held her own with Senator Morrison's wife, who did indeed ask about Emma's family. Family is complicated, isn't it? Emma said with a practiced smile. But I'd love to hear about yours. I understand your daughter just graduated from Harvard. And just like that, the senator's wife was off, talking about her brilliant daughter while Emma listened and nodded and made appropriate sounds of interest. Julian watched it all from a careful distance, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to let Emma navigate on her own. At one point, their eyes met across the room, and Emma saw something in his expression that might have been approval. Then dinner was announced, and the real test began. The seating chart had clearly been arranged by someone with a sense of humor or cruelty, possibly both. Emma found herself between a venture capitalist who looked like he'd never met anyone who made under 7 figures and a socialite who treated conversation like a competitive sport. "So Emma," the socialite said, her smile bright and dangerous, "how exactly did you meet Julian? He's usually so selective." Emma cut into her duck breast with precision. "We met through work. I was impressed by his dedication. He was impressed by my independence. It developed from there." All true. None of it what the woman was actually asking. "Work," the venture capitalist said. "What field?" "Business administration. I'm finishing my degree." "Which school?" This was the trap. Emma could feel it closing around her. The answer would tell them everything they needed to know about where she came from, what she was worth. "I started at community college," Emma said, meeting his eyes, "working full-time, taking night classes. Now I'm looking at graduate programs, probably Columbia, maybe NYU. She'd given him the truth, or close enough. Let him make of it what he would. The venture capitalist nodded slowly. "That's admirable. Self-made. I respect that." And just like that, she was in. Not because she'd pretended to be one of them, but because she'd shown them something they actually valued: ambition, the will to climb. The socialite looked less impressed, but she also looked uncertain. Emma wasn't following the script. Wasn't easy to categorize. Across the table, Emma caught Marcus watching her. He raised his wine glass in a small salute. She didn't respond. After dinner, the crowd moved to the ballroom for dancing. Emma had practiced this too, 3 sessions with a dance instructor who'd made her waltz until her feet bled. But knowing the steps and actually dancing in front of hundreds of people were different things. Julian appeared at her elbow. "We should dance. It's expected." "I know." His hand settled on her waist, formal and careful. They moved onto the floor, joining other couples in a waltz that felt like performance art. Emma focused on the steps, on not tripping, on maintaining the careful distance between their bodies. "You're doing well," Julian said quietly. "You sound surprised." "I am. Most people would have broken by now." Emma thought about working double shifts while studying for finals. Thought about choosing between groceries and textbooks. Thought about every time she'd had to smile through exhaustion and pretend everything was fine. "I don't break easy," she said. They turned and Emma caught sight of Anthony and Victor near the bar. Both men looked uncomfortable. Angry, maybe. Like they were realizing their joke wasn't funny anymore. "They're going to lose," Emma said. "The bet. You're going to win." "We're going to win," Julian corrected. "You're the one doing the work." The song ended. They stepped apart. And that's when Emma saw her. A woman in a red dress, beautiful and cold, making her way across the floor with purpose. "Who's that?" Emma asked. Julian's expression closed off. "My ex-fiancée. This just got complicated." The woman reached them, her smile sharp enough to cut. "Julian? Darling, I heard you brought a date. I had to see for myself." "Vanessa!" Julian's voice was carefully neutral. "Emma Rodriguez, this is Vanessa Ashford." Vanessa's eyes raked over Emma, cataloging everything, finding it all lacking. "So you're the new project. How charitable of you, Julian, bringing the help to a real event." The words landed like a slap. Around them, conversation dimmed. People were watching now, sensing blood in the water. Emma felt something cold settle in her chest. This was it. The moment she could run, could confirm every assumption these people had made about her, or she could stay, could fight. She chose to fight. "Help," Emma said clearly, loudly enough for others to hear. "That's an interesting word. I prefer to think of myself as someone who works for what she wants instead of marrying into it, but I can see how the distinction might be confusing." Vanessa's face went white, then read. "How dare! I dare because I earned the right to be here," Emma continued, her voice steady, her heart hammering. "I may have started as someone invisible in Julian's world, but I'm standing here now. And you? You're standing here trying to tear down a stranger because it makes you feel bigger. So yes, I'm the help. And I still have more class than you." The silence that followed was absolute. Then someone started clapping. Slow, deliberate. Emma turned and saw the federal judge she'd spoken to earlier, applause echoing through the ballroom. Others joined in. Not everyone. Some people looked scandalized, others angry. But enough. Enough to matter. Vanessa turned and fled, her red dress disappearing into the crowd. Julian looked at Emma with something that might have been awe. "You just destroyed my ex-fiancé in front of half the city's elite." "She started it," Emma said. Then, because the adrenaline was still pumping and she'd stopped caring about consequences. "Did I go too far?" "Too far would have been boring." Julian's lips quirked into something almost like a real smile. That was perfect. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. People approached Emma differently now, with caution, with respect, with the kind of wariness reserved for people who've proven they bite back. She fielded questions, made connections, even exchanged business cards with a Columbia professor who told her to look him up when she applied. At midnight, Julian's phone buzzed. He checked it, then showed Emma the screen. A message from Marcus. "You win. Wire transfer in the morning. She's sharper than I thought." Below it, similar messages from Victor and Anthony, admissions of defeat, promises to pay. "You did it," Julian said. Emma thought about the bet, about being turned into entertainment, about 3 weeks of preparation for a test she never asked to take. She thought about Vanessa's sneer and the judge's applause, and the feeling of standing in a room full of powerful people and refusing to be small. "No," she said quietly. "I survived it. There's a difference." The car ride home was silent. Emma stared out the window at the city passing by, lights blurring together, her feet aching in expensive heels. When they pulled up to the estate, Julian walked her to the staff entrance, a gesture that felt significant, though Emma couldn't say why. "About what I promised," he said. "The degree. I meant it." "I know." "And Emma? Thank you. For tonight, for proving them wrong." Emma looked at him, really looked. Saw past the expensive suit and the power and the carefully controlled expression. Saw someone who'd made a stupid bet because he was too proud to back down, and who'd been surprised by the outcome. "You're welcome," she said. "But next time someone wants to use me as entertainment, tell them no." She went inside before he could respond, kicked off the heels in her room, and fell onto her bed still wearing the gold dress. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, Emma's phone buzzed with a notification. An email from Columbia University's admissions office, responding to an inquiry she'd sent weeks ago. They'd love to discuss her application. Could she come in for an interview? Emma smiled in the darkness. The gala was over. The bet was won. But her real life, the one she'd been building in the shadows while everyone looked through her, was just beginning. She had learned something tonight. Being invisible was a choice, and she was done choosing it. The gold dress hung in Emma's closet like evidence of a crime she'd committed against her own common sense. She'd washed it, steamed it, returned it to the garment bag Vivian had provided, but she couldn't bring herself to send it back. Not yet. It felt like giving up proof that the gala had actually happened, that she hadn't dreamed the whole impossible night. 3 days passed before Julian summoned her again. 3 days of scrubbing floors and serving meals to his associates. 3 days of pretending the earth beneath her feet hadn't shifted. Mrs. Chen watched her with worried eyes but said nothing. The other staff kept their distance, like Emma had become radioactive. Maria cornered her in the laundry room on the 4th morning. "Is it true you made Vanessa Ashford cry?" "She didn't cry. Everyone's saying she left in tears. That you destroyed her in front of the whole room." Emma folded a pillowcase with more force than necessary. "I told her the truth. If that destroyed her, she wasn't built very solid to begin with. People are talking about you and Mr. Valente. People always talk. Doesn't make it real." But Maria's words stuck with Emma through the rest of her shift, through the afternoon when she finally received the text message she'd been half expecting, half dreading. "My office, 4 p.m. JV." She showed up at 3:58, knocked twice, waited for permission to enter. Julian sat at his desk with his laptop open, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing for her to sit while he finished a conversation in clipped sentences about market positions and quarterly projections. Emma studied the office while she waited. The art on the walls, the books on the shelves, the complete absence of anything personal or revealing. He ended the call and set the phone down with the kind of careful precision that suggested he was choosing his words before he spoke them. "The Columbia interview is next Tuesday," he said. "I've arranged for you to have the day off." Emma blinked. "How did you know about—" "I make it my business to know things." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer, slid it across to her. "This is everything you'll need. Letters of recommendation from Patricia and from the etiquette coach. A financial statement showing you have the means to attend. And a letter from me, as your employer, confirming your work history and character." Emma opened the folder with hands that wanted to shake. The letters were detailed, glowing, completely inappropriate given that she cleaned this man's house for a living. The financial statement showed numbers that made her dizzy. "This isn't real," she said quietly. "It's as real as you make it. The money is in an account in your name. Tuition, housing, expenses for 4 years. It's yours whether you go to Columbia or somewhere else. The bet is over. You won. This is what winning looks like." Emma stared at the papers, at the future written in black and white, at the escape hatch someone was offering her. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a trap. "What's the catch?" Julian leaned back in his chair, studying her. "The catch is that my associates now know you exist. They know you're smart, that you can hold your own, that you embarrass them. Marcus has already asked if you're available for consultation on a project he's running. Victor wants to hire you for his wife's charity board. Anthony wants to know if I can be bought," Emma finished. "Actually, he wants to know if you're single. But yes, essentially the same thing." Emma closed the folder. "I'm a housemaid. They watched me serve them drinks for 2 years. Now suddenly I'm worth something because I wore an expensive dress and didn't fall on my face? You're worth something because you proved them wrong. In their world, that's currency. It's bullshit." Julian's eyebrow rose. Emma had never cursed in front of him before, had barely spoken to him before the gala except in yes sir, no sir responses to direct questions. "Probably," he agreed. "But it's the bullshit that runs the world. You can reject it, stay here, keep working as staff and taking night classes and grinding yourself down over the next decade. Or you can take what they're offering, go to school full-time and actually build something. At what cost?" "What do you mean?" Emma met his eyes. "People don't give away free educations, especially not people like you. So what do you want from me? What's the real price?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Julian stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city sprawling below his estate. When he spoke again, his voice was different, rougher, more honest. "I want to not be the kind of man who bets on people like they're horses. I want to prove that the night of the gala wasn't a fluke, that investing in someone's potential isn't charity, it's good business. And maybe—" He paused, like the next words cost him something. "I want to see what happens when someone from outside our world gets the chance to actually compete in it. Like a science experiment. Like a partnership." Emma stood, folder in hand. "I need to think about it. Take your time. The offer doesn't expire." She made it to the door before his voice stopped her. "Emma, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. About the bet. About all of it. You deserved better." Emma looked back at him, this powerful man who ran an empire from behind a desk, who made decisions that affected thousands of lives, who'd bet money on her like she was entertainment. "Yeah," she said, "I did." She left before he could respond. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed in the staff quarters, staring at the folder Julian had given her, thinking about her mother's voice on the phone 2 days ago. "Baby, I'm so proud of you. Going to that fancy party, showing them what you're made of." Her mother didn't know about the bet. Didn't know Emma had been a punchline before she was a person. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Patricia. Julian told me about Columbia. You'll need interview prep. I have time Thursday if you're interested. No charge. You earned this." Another text, different number. "Vivian here. Sending you the gold dress. It's yours. You gave it life. Keep it." Then one more, this one from Maria. "Some men in suits came asking about you today. Mrs. Chen told them you weren't available. Just thought you should know." Emma sat up, heart pounding. Men in suits asking questions. That wasn't good. That was the kind of thing that happened before bad things unfolded. She grabbed her robe and went to find Mrs. Chen. The older woman was in the kitchen preparing tomorrow's breakfast, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Tell me about the men," Emma said. Mrs. Chen didn't look up from her chopping. "They said they were from a security firm doing background checks. Asked about your work history, your character, whether you'd ever been in trouble." "Did you tell them anything?" "I told them you were an excellent employee who kept to herself and worked hard. Then I told them to leave." Emma leaned against the counter. "This is because of the gala. This is because you made powerful people notice you, and powerful people don't like surprises." Mrs. Chen finally looked up, her face creased with concern. "Whatever Mr. Valente offered you, whatever deal he's proposing, be careful, Emma. Men like him don't give things away. They make investments, and investments expect returns." Emma thought about the folder upstairs, about 4 years of tuition, about a future that didn't involve scrubbing other people's floors. "What if I want to be a good investment?" she asked quietly. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Then make sure you own yourself at the end of it. Don't let them buy you, even with kindness." The next morning, Emma found Julian in the gym, a room in the east wing she'd cleaned but never seen occupied. He was on the treadmill, running like he was trying to escape something, sweat soaking through his shirt. He saw her in the mirror, slowed to a stop, grabbed a towel. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Men came asking about me yesterday. Security firm, background check." Julian's expression went cold. "I didn't authorize that." "Then who did?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking, then, "Marcus. He's thorough. If he wants to bring you into his project, he'll vet you first. It's standard procedure." "I don't want to be part of his project. I don't want anything from any of them." "Then tell him no. You're allowed to say no, Emma." She laughed, the sound bitter. "Am I? Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like the moment you brought me to that gala, I stopped being invisible and started being something everyone wants a piece of. And I don't know how to be that person." Julian stepped off the treadmill, came closer. He smelled like expensive soap and honest sweat. "You don't have to be anything except yourself." That's what worked at the gala. That's what scared them. I wasn't myself at the gala. I was wearing someone else's dress, saying things a coach taught me to say, playing a role. No. You were being the version of yourself you haven't had permission to be before. The smart one, the sharp one, the one who doesn't apologize for taking up space. He paused. That's who you are when no one's making you small. Emma wanted to argue, to push back, to tell him he was wrong, but something in his words hit too close to truth. She had felt different at the gala, not fake, just unrestrained. "The Columbia interview is Tuesday," she said finally. "I'll go. I'll see what happens. But I'm not making promises about Marcus or Victor or any of the rest of them." "Fair enough." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Why are you doing this?" "Really? Not the speech about good investments, the truth." Julian was quiet for so long Emma thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because I spent my whole life being groomed for this world. Private schools, Ivy League, connections that opened every door before I even had to knock. And I still turned into the kind of person who makes bets on other people's dignity for entertainment. You clawed your way to that gala on your own merit, with none of the advantages I had, and you walked in with more integrity than I've managed in 35 years. So maybe I'm doing this because I want to see what happens when someone who actually deserves the opportunities gets them." Emma stared at him. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her, maybe the most honest thing he'd said to anyone. "That's a lot of pressure to put on one person," she said. "Then don't carry it for me. Carry it for yourself." The Columbia interview happened in a glass office on the 16th floor of a building that smelled like ambition and coffee. Professor David Chen was 60, sharp-eyed and completely unimpressed by the carefully curated version of Emma's background that the application materials presented. "Your transcripts are excellent," he said, scanning her file. "Top of your class at community college, near-perfect scores on your entrance exams. But there's a gap here. 2 years where you're listed as working full-time but not taking classes. What happened?" Emma had practiced this answer with Patricia, had rehearsed it until it sounded natural, polished, safe. But sitting across from this man who looked like he could see through walls, she decided to tell the truth instead. "My mother got sick. Cancer. I dropped my classes to work double shifts so we could keep the insurance and pay for treatment." She beat it, but by then I was behind on everything. Took me 2 years to save enough to go back to school part-time. Professor Chen set down the file. And now you're working as, he checked the letter from Julian, executive assistant to Julian Valente. Emma didn't correct him. The letter called her position something more dignified than housemaid, and she wasn't about to argue with the fiction. I am. He speaks highly of you, says you have a mind for strategy and an understanding of complex systems most graduate students lack. Professor Chen leaned back in his chair. He also donated a substantial amount to our business school last week, wants to fund a scholarship for non-traditional students. Students like you. Emma's stomach dropped. I didn't know about that. I believe you, but it puts me in an interesting position. On one hand, you're clearly qualified. Your work is exceptional, your recommendations glowing, your test scores outstanding. On the other hand, I now have to wonder if you're getting in on merit or on money. I'm getting in on merit. The money just makes it possible for me to actually attend. Tell me something, Emma. Why Columbia? Why not stay with night classes, with the slower path? You were making it work. Emma thought about her answer, about all the safe, practiced responses she could give. Then she threw them away and said what she actually felt. Because I'm tired of making it work. I'm tired of fighting twice as hard for half as much. I'm tired of being invisible to people who have half my intelligence and twice my opportunities. I want to walk into a room and have people take me seriously, not because I'm wearing the right dress or saying the right things, but because I earned my place there. And I can't do that working doubles and taking night classes for the next decade. I'll burn out or give up or both. Columbia is my shortcut. And yeah, someone's paying for it, but I'll be the one doing the work. The degree will be mine. Professor Chen studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. When can you start? Emma walked out of that building in a daze, clutching an acceptance letter and a financial aid package that covered what Julian's fund didn't. She made it to the subway before she started crying, ugly, shaking sobs that she couldn't control and didn't bother trying to hide. Other passengers looked away, uncomfortable with her breakdown. Emma didn't care. She cried for her mother and her siblings, and the version of herself that had believed this kind of thing didn't happen to people like her. She cried because winning felt like losing sometimes, because every door that opened meant walking away from something familiar. She cried because she was terrified and relieved and angry and grateful all at once. Then she pulled herself together, wiped her face, and texted Julian, "I'm in." His response came immediately. Congratulations. You earned it. Emma stared at those 3 words, you earned it, and felt something settle in her chest. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had. The next 2 weeks blurred together. Emma gave notice at the Valente estate, worked her final shifts with a strange mix of relief and regret, packed her few belongings into boxes that didn't come close to filling the moving truck Julian insisted on providing. Mrs. Chen cried. Maria hugged her. The other staff looked at her like she was a traitor or a hero, depending on who you asked. Julian gave her a check for 6 months of salary as severance. For the transition, he said, so you don't have to work during your first semester. Emma almost refused, almost told him he'd done enough, that she didn't want to owe him any more than she already did. But pride was expensive, and she was trying to be practical. Thank you, she said instead. Stay in touch. Let me know how it goes. She promised she would, even though they both knew she probably wouldn't. This chapter was closing. Whatever came next, it needed to be hers alone. But Marcus had other ideas. He showed up at Emma's new apartment, a studio near campus that she could barely afford even with Julian's help, on a Saturday morning 2 weeks before classes started. Emma answered the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, hair tied back, no makeup, completely unprepared for company. Marcus. She didn't invite him in. Emma, I hope I'm not intruding. You are. He smiled like she'd told a joke. I'll be quick. I have a proposition. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet. Don't need to. Whatever you're offering, the answer is no. Marcus's smile faded. You think you know how this works? You think because you impressed a room full of people at a party, you're set? The world doesn't work that way, Emma. You need connections. You need people who can open doors, make introductions, smooth the path. I'll make my own path. With what? Julian's charity? That runs out eventually. And then what? You think your degree alone will be enough? There are 1,000 smart kids at Columbia. What makes you special? Emma felt anger rise in her chest, hot and sharp. I make myself special. Not you, not Julian, not anyone who thinks I owe them something because they saw potential in me. I don't owe you shit, Marcus. And you can tell Victor and Anthony the same thing. I'm not interested in your projects or your connections or whatever game you're playing. I'm here to learn. That's it. Marcus's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Julian won't protect you forever. And when he stops, you'll wish you'd been smarter about building alliances. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. Now get out of my building. She closed the door in his face, locked it, waited until she heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway. Then she sank to the floor, heart racing, hands shaking with adrenaline. Her phone rang. Julian, Marcus just left your apartment. How did you? He called me, said you were ungrateful and short-sighted. I told him he was an entitled prick who can't handle rejection. We're not speaking right now. Emma closed her eyes. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He's out of line. They all are. I'm handling it. I don't need you to handle things for me. I know, but I'm doing it anyway. Consider it penance for starting this whole mess. He paused. Emma, I need to tell you something about why I made that bet. Julian, they were going to humiliate you regardless. The night of the party, they'd been drinking, making jokes about the staff, about how entertaining it would be to put one of you in a situation where you'd fail. I made the bet to control the situation, to make sure that if it happened, you'd at least have preparation, resources, a fighting chance. Emma's breath caught. You're telling me you were protecting me? I'm telling you I was trying to turn their cruelty into something you could use. And maybe that makes me just as bad as them. Maybe worse because I convinced myself it was noble. But you deserve to know the truth. Emma didn't know what to say. The story she'd been telling herself about Julian being just like the others, about the bet being pure ego, was crumbling. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, she said finally. Neither do I. But you're out now. You're free. And whatever happens next, it's yours. I won't interfere unless you ask me to. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. The hard part comes next. He hung up before she could respond. Emma sat on the floor of her empty apartment, boxes stacked around her, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked a city that felt both familiar and completely foreign. She thought about Mrs. Chen's warning, don't let them buy you, even with kindness. Thought about Marcus's anger and Julian's confession and the weight of expectation she hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. Somewhere in the building, a dog barked. Someone laughed. Life continued, indifferent to Emma's crisis of conscience. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at Columbia's campus in the distance. The buildings looked smaller from here, less intimidating, just brick and glass and the promise of something different. Emma pulled out her phone and opened a new note. Wrote 3 words. I earned this. Then she got back to unpacking. Classes started in 2 weeks. She had work to do. Columbia hit Emma like a freight train disguised as an opportunity. The first week of classes, she sat in a lecture hall with 200 other students and realized that being the smartest person in a community college night class meant nothing here. Everyone was smart. Everyone had survived their own version of impossible to get through these doors. The difference was that most of them had also survived with family money, legacy admissions, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to prove they belonged. Emma took notes in a spiral notebook while her classmates typed on laptops that cost more than her monthly rent. She wore jeans and clearance rack sweaters while they showed up in designer casual that probably required a stylist to achieve. And when Professor Richardson asked a question about market disruption theory, Emma's hand stayed down while a guy named Bryce, who'd introduced himself by mentioning his father's hedge fund, launched into an answer that was 50% buzzwords and 50% bullshit. Interesting perspective, Professor Richardson said, in a tone that suggested it wasn't. Anyone else? Emma's hand lifted before she could talk herself out of it. Yes, in the back. Market disruption isn't about innovation for its own sake, Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. It's about identifying inefficiencies that exist because the people in power benefit from them. Real disruption threatens those benefits, which is why it almost never comes from inside the system. The room went quiet. Professor Richardson's eyebrows rose. And you are? Emma Rodriguez. Well, Miss Rodriguez, that's the first intelligent thing I've heard in this room all week. Everyone else, take notes. This is what critical thinking looks like. Emma felt every eye in the room turn toward her, felt the weight of judgment, curiosity, and in Bryce's case, outright hostility. She'd made herself visible again. And just like at the gala, visibility came with consequences. After class, a girl with perfect highlights and a Prada bag approached her in the hallway. "That was amazing in there. I'm Sophie Chen. We should study together sometime." Emma recognized the tone, bright, friendly, calculating. This wasn't an invitation. It was reconnaissance. "Maybe," Emma said non-committally. "You're the one everyone's talking about, right? The scholarship student who used to work for Julian Valente?" There it was. Emma hadn't mentioned Julian to anyone, hadn't put him on her application, had tried to keep that part of her life separate. But of course people knew. People always knew. "I worked in his household," Emma said carefully. "I don't work for him anymore." "Right, but you went to the Whitmore Gala with him. My mom was there. She said you destroyed Vanessa Ashford in front of everyone." Sophie's smile was sharp. "That must have felt good. It felt necessary. Well, if you ever want to grab coffee and talk about it, I'm around. Us scholarship students should stick together." Emma doubted Sophie had ever needed a scholarship in her life, but she smiled politely and extracted herself from the conversation before it could go anywhere more invasive. She made it to the library, found a quiet corner, and finally let herself breathe. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How's school, baby? Learning lots?" Emma stared at the message, at the simple assumption that college was just about learning, about absorbing information and getting grades. Her mother had no idea what this world actually was, a battlefield where knowledge was the least important weapon. "It's good," Emma texted back. "Hard, but good." Another message appeared, this one from Julian. "Heard you made an impression in Richardson's class. He's tough. Sounds like you held your own." Emma frowned at her phone. How did Julian already know what happened in her class? Was he having her watched, keeping tabs on her progress? The thought sent a chill down her spine. "How did you hear that?" she typed. "Richardson and I served on a board together. He mentioned a new student who actually understands market theory. I guessed it was you." Emma wanted to believe him, wanted to think it was coincidence, not surveillance, but Mrs. Chen's warning echoed in her head. Men like him don't give things away. They make investments. "Tell him I said hi," Emma responded, then put her phone on silent and tried to focus on the textbook in front of her. The weeks blurred together. Emma woke at 5 to study before her 8 a.m. classes. She worked through lunch, attended seminars in the afternoon, studied until midnight in the library, while other students went to bars or parties or whatever it was that people with safety nets did with their free time. She called her mother every Sunday, sent money home when she could spare it, ignored the texts from Maria asking how the rich kids were treating her. She didn't go to parties, didn't join study groups, kept herself separate, insulated, focused. If people thought she was cold or standoffish, fine. Better that than letting them close enough to see the cracks. But isolation had costs. 2 months into the semester, Emma found herself sitting alone in the cafeteria, eating a sandwich she'd made in her apartment because the meal plan was an expense she couldn't justify. Across the room, Sophie and her friends laughed at some joke, their table full of the easy intimacy that came from shared experiences and similar backgrounds. Emma told herself she didn't care, told herself she was here to learn, not to make friends. But the truth was harder and sharper. She was lonely in a way she'd never been when she was cleaning Julian's floors and reading Tolstoy in the break room. At least then, she'd known her place. Here, she was floating in some undefined space between worlds, not quite belonging to either. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Emma almost didn't answer. "Hello? Emma Rodriguez?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Speaking." "This is Jennifer Walsh from Metropolitan Magazine. I'm writing a piece about the Whitmore Gala, and I'd love to get your perspective on the evening, specifically about your interaction with Vanessa Ashford." Emma's stomach dropped. "How did you get this number?" "I'm a journalist. It's what I do, so can I ask you a few questions?" "No, and don't call again." Emma hung up, heart pounding. A journalist, writing about the gala. That meant people were still talking about it, still dissecting that night, still treating Emma like she was a story instead of a person. She called Julian. He answered on the second ring. A reporter just called me about the gala. Jennifer Walsh, Metropolitan Magazine. I know, she contacted me yesterday. What did you tell her? Nothing. It's none of her business. But Emma, I need you to understand something. That night made waves. People remember it. And in this city, being memorable can be useful or dangerous, depending on who's doing the remembering. What's that supposed to mean? Julian was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. It means Vanessa has friends, powerful friends. And some of them don't appreciate the way you handled that confrontation. They see you as someone who needs to be managed. Managed how? I don't know yet, but I'm hearing things. Conversations where your name comes up in ways that concern me. Just be careful, Emma. Watch who you trust. I don't trust anyone. Good. Keep it that way. He hung up before she could respond. Emma sat in the cafeteria, surrounded by students who had no idea they were sharing space with someone who'd apparently made enemies in circles they'd spent their whole lives trying to access. She thought about going back to her apartment, to the safety of her books and her isolation. But something stubborn in her refused to run. She finished her sandwich, threw away the trash, went to her afternoon seminar and participated in the discussion like nothing was wrong. And when Bryce made another half-baked argument about supply chain economics, Emma calmly dismantled it with facts and logic until the professor had to cut her off because class time was running out. Bryce glared at her as they filed out of the room. You always have to be right, don't you? I have to be right more than you do, Emma said. You can afford to be wrong. I can't. She walked away before he could respond. That night, Emma couldn't focus on studying. She kept thinking about Julian's warning, about Vanessa's powerful friends, about being managed. She thought about the gold dress hanging in her closet, about the version of herself who'd worn it and believed she could win. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sophie. Party at Bryce's place Friday. You should come. Might be good for you to socialize. Emma stared at the message. Every instinct told her to decline, to stay in her lane, to avoid complications. But maybe Julian was right. Maybe being memorable meant she needed to be strategic about it. I'll think about it, she typed back. Sophie's response was immediate. Do more than think. Show up. These connections matter. Emma set down her phone and returned to her textbook, but the words blurred together. She was tired. Tired of being careful. Tired of calculating every move. Tired of living like she was one mistake away from losing everything. Friday came faster than Emma wanted it to. She almost didn't go to the party. Changed her mind 3 times. Finally put on jeans and a sweater that looked presentable but not like she was trying too hard, and took the subway to Bryce's address in the Upper East Side. The apartment was exactly what Emma expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick, furniture that cost more than some people's cars. The party was already in full swing when she arrived, music thumping, people drinking expensive liquor like it was water. Sophie materialized at her elbow within minutes. You came! I'm so glad! Come on, I'll introduce you around. The next hour was a blur of names and faces and conversations that felt like tests disguised as small talk. Everyone wanted to know about Emma's background, her connection to Julian, what really happened at the Whitmore Gala. She deflected and redirected, using the skills Patricia had taught her, but it was exhausting. She was about to leave when she saw him, Julian, standing near the windows, talking to Bryce's father with the easy familiarity of people who'd known each other for years. He looked the same as always, expensive suit, controlled expression, radiating the kind of power that made people gravitate toward him. Their eyes met across the room. Julian's expression didn't change, but something flickered there. Surprise, maybe, or concern. Emma walked over before she could talk herself out of it. Mr. Valente? She said formally. Ms. Rodriguez? He turned to Bryce's father. Thomas, have you met Emma? She's in your son's program at Columbia. Thomas's handshake was firm, his smile polite and empty. Bryce mentioned you, said you have strong opinions. I have informed opinions, Emma corrected. There's a difference. Thomas's smile tightened. I'm sure there is. He excused himself, leaving Emma and Julian standing awkwardly by the windows. What are you doing here? Julian asked quietly. I could ask you the same thing. Thomas and I have business dealings. This is expected. He paused. You, on the other hand, don't strike me as someone who enjoys this kind of thing. I don't, but apparently connections matter, or so I've been told. Julian's expression darkened. Who told you that? Everyone, you included. I told you to be careful, not to throw yourself into the lion's den. Emma laughed, the sound bitter. You think this is the lion's den? Julian, I spent 2 years serving drinks to men who planned illegal deals in your dining room. I cleaned up after parties where people discussed things that would put them in prison. This, she gestured at the room full of drunk business students. This is nothing. Julian stared at her. You never said anything about what? The fact that your associates aren't exactly operating above board? I'm not stupid, Julian. I always knew what kind of world I was working in. I just kept my head down and my mouth shut because that's how you survive. The silence between them was heavy. Julian glanced around the room, checking if anyone was listening, then lowered his voice. We need to talk, but not here. Can you meet me tomorrow? Why? Because there are things you need to know. Things I should have told you before, but I thought keeping you separate would keep you safe. I was wrong. Emma's pulse quickened. What kind of things? Tomorrow, there's a coffee shop on Amsterdam and 110th. Meet me there at 10. Before Emma could respond, Sophie appeared with 2 drinks, her smile bright and invasive. There you are. I lost you in the crowd. Who's your friend? Just someone I used to work for, Emma said, taking one of the drinks, even though she had no intention of drinking it. Sophie's eyes widened with recognition. Oh my God, you're Julian Valente. My parents talk about you all the time. You run that investment firm, right? Among other things, Julian said smoothly. He glanced at Emma one more time, a look that said, be careful, then excused himself and disappeared into the crowd. Sophie turned to Emma, practically vibrating with excitement. You didn't tell me you actually knew him, like personally knew him. It's not a big deal. Are you kidding? He's one of the most powerful people in the city, and he was talking to you like you were equals. Sophie's expression shifted, became calculating. You could introduce me. My father's been trying to get a meeting with him for months. Emma set down the untouched drink. I'm not a networking opportunity, Sophie. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. Emma left the party without saying goodbye. She walked to the subway, rode it back to her neighborhood, climbed the stairs to her apartment, and locked the door behind her. Her phone buzzed with texts. Sophie apologizing. Bryce asking where she'd gone. Someone she didn't know asking if she wanted to grab brunch tomorrow. Emma silenced her phone and stared at the ceiling. Julian's words echoed in her head. There are things you need to know. She didn't sleep that night. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Emma arrived at 9:45. She ordered black coffee she didn't want and sat at a table in the back, watching the door. Julian showed up exactly at 10. No bodyguards, no entourage, just himself in jeans and a sweater that made him look younger and somehow more human. He ordered his own coffee and sat across from her without preamble. The night of the gala wasn't random, he said. The bet wasn't random. Nothing about any of this has been random. Emma's hands tightened around her cup. Explain. 6 months before the gala, I found out that Marcus and some of my other associates were running a side operation. Nothing illegal, technically, but unethical enough that it would destroy reputations if it got out. They were using information from my network to make private deals, cutting me out of the profits. So you made a bet about me to what? Distract them? I made a bet about you to create leverage. If you succeeded at the gala, if you proved yourself in front of the right people, you became valuable. And valuable people have protection. I thought if they saw you as useful, as someone with potential connections to my world, they'd back off. Leave you alone. Emma's laugh was sharp and humorless. You used me as a chess piece. I used you as a shield. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. Julian's jaw tightened. You're right. It was manipulative and wrong, and I'm sorry. But Emma, it worked. Marcus hasn't touched you since the gala. Neither has Victor or Anthony. They're too worried about the optics, about what it would look like if they went after someone I publicly supported. And now? Now that I'm at Columbia, away from your world? What happens when they decide I'm not worth protecting anymore? Julian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and serious. That's why I needed to talk to you. There's been chatter, people asking questions about you, about your background, about whether you have information that could be damaging. Vanessa's been particularly aggressive. Let me guess. She wants revenge. She wants to destroy you, and she has the resources to do it. Julian leaned forward. I can protect you from most things, but I need you to be honest with me about what you saw, what you heard when you worked at my house. Because if there's something they can use against you, or against me through you, I need to know now. Emma thought about all those dinners she'd served, all those conversations she'd overheard while she was invisible. She thought about ledgers left open on Julian's desk, about phone calls that happened in rooms she was cleaning, about the look on Marcus's face when he thought no one was watching. I heard a lot, she said finally. I saw a lot, but I never wrote anything down, never recorded anything, never told anyone. Because I knew the moment I became a liability, I'd disappear. You wouldn't disappear, I wouldn't let that happen. You don't get to make that promise. You're not in control here, Julian. None of us are. We're all just trying not to drown. Julian reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. Then let me throw you a lifeline. Tell me what you need. Protection, money, a different school in a different city, whatever it takes to keep you safe. Emma pulled her hand back. I need you to stop trying to save me. I need you to stop making decisions about my life without asking me first. And I need you to understand that I'm not some project you get to manage. I'm a person, and I'm done being moved around like I don't have a choice. The words hung between them, sharp and final. Julian stood, his expression unreadable. You're right, I'm sorry. I'll back off. He left money on the table for both coffees and walked out without looking back. Emma sat alone in the coffee shop, hands shaking, heart pounding, feeling like she'd just burned a bridge she might need later. But she also felt something else. Free. For the first time since the Gala, since Columbia, since all of it, she felt like herself again. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should be more careful about who you trust. Some people aren't what they seem. A friend. Emma stared at the message, ice forming in her chest. She looked around the coffee shop, at the other customers, the barista, the people walking past the windows. Someone was watching. Someone knew. She stood, left the coffee shop, and walked back to campus with the feeling of eyes on her back. When she got to her apartment, she checked every room, every window, every lock. Nothing seemed disturbed, but the message on her phone felt like a threat disguised as advice. Emma pulled out her laptop and did something she'd been avoiding. She Googled herself. The results were worse than she expected. Articles about the Whitmore Gala, speculation about her relationship with Julian, think pieces about class mobility, and whether Emma was a success story or a cautionary tale. Someone had dug up her old social media, posted screenshots of her working-class background, turned her life into content for strangers to consume and judge. One article was titled, From Housemaid to High Society, The Curious Case of Emma Rodriguez. It featured a photo someone had taken of her at Bryce's party, talking to Julian by the windows. Emma closed the laptop before she could read more. She felt sick, exposed, like she'd stripped naked in front of the world without realizing it. Her phone rang. Julian again. Don't hang up, he said before she could speak. I just saw the articles. I'm handling it. How exactly are you handling it? My legal team is sending cease and desist letters to the publications, threatening lawsuits for invasion of privacy. It won't make everything disappear, but it'll slow them down. This is my fault. I should have stayed invisible. This is their fault. People who treat other people's lives like entertainment. You didn't do anything wrong, Emma. You survived, and they can't forgive you for it. Emma sank onto her bed, exhausted. I don't know how to do this, how to exist in this world without getting destroyed by it. You learn, you adapt, you find people you can trust, and you build walls against everyone else. Julian paused. And you let me help, even if you hate that you need help. I don't want to need you. I know, but you do, and right now, that's going to have to be enough. Emma closed her eyes. Outside, the city hummed with indifferent life. Inside, she felt the walls closing in. She thought about her mother's question. Learning lots? She'd learned plenty. She'd learned that visibility was violence, that success came with a price tag no one warned you about, that the higher you climbed, the harder people worked to push you back down. Okay, she said finally. Help me, but on my terms. No more secrets, no more manipulations. We do this honestly, or we don't do it at all. Deal. Emma hung up and sat in the quiet of her apartment, feeling like she'd just made a pact with someone she didn't fully trust, but couldn't afford to refuse. The semester was only half over. She had classes to pass, papers to write, a future to build. But first she had to survive the present. And survival, Emma was learning, required weapons she hadn't known she'd need. The weapons came in unexpected forms. The first was information. Emma started keeping a journal, not the kind with feelings and reflections, but a ledger of facts, names she heard, connections she observed, conversations that seemed insignificant until you lined them up and saw the pattern. She didn't know what she'd do with any of it, but Mrs. Chen had taught her that knowledge was the only currency that held value in any economy. The second weapon was Professor Richardson. He'd taken an interest in Emma after that first class, started assigning her additional reading, invited her to office hours to discuss theories that went beyond the curriculum. She went because she needed the education, but also because she was learning that allies came in strange packages. "You're not like the other students," he said during one of their meetings, pushing a stack of academic journals across his desk. "Most of them are here because it's expected. You're here because you need to be. That gives you an advantage they'll never understand." "It also gives me disadvantages they'll never face," Emma countered. "True. But the question isn't whether the game is fair, it's whether you're going to play anyway." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with sharp eyes. "Julian Valente spoke highly of you when he made that donation. Said you had more raw intelligence than most people he'd hired with Ivy League credentials. That's quite an endorsement." Emma's guard went up instantly. "He exaggerates." "I don't think he does. I think he sees something in you that scares him. Potential that doesn't need his permission to exist." Richardson paused. "Be careful with that man, Emma. His world has rules you're still learning, and the people in it don't forgive mistakes." "I'm getting that impression." "Good. Use it. Fear is clarifying." Emma left his office with more questions than answers, but also with something else. Validation from someone who had nothing to gain from lying to her. The third weapon arrived in her mailbox 2 weeks later. It was an invitation, expensive paper with embossed lettering, to a private symposium on economic inequality hosted by the Whitmore Foundation. Emma recognized the name immediately, the same Whitmore family whose Gala had started all of this. The invitation was addressed specifically to her, with a handwritten note at the bottom: "We'd be honored by your presence and perspective. Your voice matters in this conversation." Emma stared at the invitation like it might explode. She called Julian. "Did you have anything to do with this?" "With what?" "The Whitmore Foundation just invited me to a symposium on inequality. The irony is almost funny." Julian was quiet for a moment. "I didn't arrange that, but I'm not surprised. Eleanor Whitmore is a true believer. She actually cares about these issues, and she probably heard about you from the Gala." "Heard what exactly?" "That you're the real thing. Not someone playing at understanding poverty because it's fashionable. Someone who actually lived it." He paused. "Are you going?" "I don't know. Feels like walking back into the fire." "Then don't go. You don't owe them anything." But Emma was already thinking about it. Thinking about a room full of wealthy people discussing inequality like it was an intellectual exercise, and what it would mean to walk in there with actual answers instead of theories. The idea terrified her. It also felt necessary. "I'll think about it," she said, and hung up before Julian could offer more advice she didn't ask for. The next day, Vanessa Ashford made her move. Emma was leaving the library when she saw them. 3 people with cameras, waiting outside the main entrance. The moment they spotted her, they surged forward. "Emma Rodriguez, we're from Metropolitan Magazine. Can we ask you a few questions?" Emma kept walking, but they followed, cameras clicking, voices overlapping. "Is it true you're being funded by Julian Valente? What's the nature of your relationship? Did you really work as his housemaid before he brought you to the Whitmore Gala?" Emma felt her chest tighten, felt the familiar urge to run or hide or disappear, but then she remembered what she'd told Vanessa at the Gala about earning her right to exist in that space. She stopped walking, turned to face them. "I worked in Julian Valente's household, yes. I also worked my way through community college while supporting my family. I earned my spot at Columbia through merit, not connections. And my relationship with Mr. Valente is professional and none of your business." She met the lead journalist's eyes. "You want a story about class mobility? Here it is. I'm living it. every day. And your cameras won't change that. She walked away before they could ask more questions. Her hands were shaking, her heart pounding, but she'd done it. She'd faced them down instead of running. Her phone buzzed immediately, a text from Julian. I saw, well done. Then another text, this one from Professor Richardson. My office, now. Emma changed direction, heading for Richardson's building. He was waiting when she arrived, his expression grim. Sit down. Emma sat. That little performance outside the library is going to be all over social media within the hour. Are you prepared for that? I didn't plan it. I know, but it happened anyway, and now you need to decide what you're going to do about it. He pulled up a website on his computer, turned the screen toward her. It was already there. A video of Emma's confrontation with the journalist posted 20 minutes ago. The comments were already multiplying. Some were supportive. Good for her. Tell the truth. Others were vicious, sleeping her way to success and acting like she earned it. Emma felt sick. This is what I was warning you about, Richardson said quietly. Visibility. Once you have it, you can't control how people use it. You can only control how you respond. How do I respond to this? You double down. You go to that Whitmore symposium. You speak your truth, your actual experience, and you make it impossible for them to dismiss you as someone's charity project. He leaned forward. Or you disappear, transfer schools, change your name, start over somewhere they haven't heard of you. Both options have merit. But you need to choose quickly. Emma thought about her mother working double shifts, about her siblings fighting their own battles, about every moment she'd spent invisible, believing that staying small would keep her safe. It hadn't. Safety was an illusion. The only question was whether she'd be afraid while hiding or afraid while standing. I'm going to the symposium, she said. Richardson nodded. Then you're going to need help preparing. These people are sharks. They'll smile while they tear you apart if you give them the chance. What do I do? You do what you're good at. You tell the truth, but you do it strategically. He started writing on a notepad. We have 3 weeks. Let's get to work. The preparation was brutal. Richardson drilled her on talking points, on deflecting hostile questions, on maintaining composure under pressure. He brought in colleagues to play devil's advocate, throwing scenarios at Emma that made the journalists outside the library look gentle. Why should we listen to you about inequality when you're benefiting from the exact system you're criticizing? One professor asked during a practice session. Emma had learned to handle this one. Because I'm proof the system works for 1 in 1,000 while crushing the other 999. I'm not the success story. I'm the exception that proves the rule. And exceptions don't change systems. They just make people feel better about not changing them. Richardson nodded approvingly. Good. Again. Harder question. The sessions left Emma exhausted but sharper. She was learning to weaponize her experience, to turn her background from a liability into leverage. It felt manipulative. It also felt necessary. Between preparation sessions, Emma tried to maintain some semblance of normal student life. She attended classes, wrote papers, avoided Bryce and his friends who now looked at her with open hostility. Sophie had stopped texting after Emma refused to introduce her to Julian. The isolation should have bothered Emma more than it did. But she had other problems. The articles kept coming. Someone had leaked information about the scholarship fund Julian had established, making it look like he was buying Emma's loyalty or silence. Another piece speculated about whether Emma had information about Julian's business dealings that made her valuable enough to protect. The conspiracy theories multiplied faster than Emma could track them. Julian called her one night, his voice tight with anger. This is Vanessa. All of it. She's feeding information to journalists, paying them to dig into your background. Can you prove it? I'm working on it. But Emma, we need to address this head on. I want to make a public statement supporting you, clarifying the nature of our relationship. No. Emma, if you make a statement, you confirm that there's something that needs clarifying. Right now, it's speculation. The moment you respond, it becomes real. Emma paced her apartment, thinking through the angles. Let them talk. Let them dig. They won't find anything because there's nothing to find. And eventually, they'll move on to the next story. What if they don't? Then I'll deal with it at the symposium, on my terms, not yours. Julian was silent for a long moment. You've changed. Yeah, I learned from the best manipulators I know. She hung up before he could respond. The weeks blurred together. Emma studied, prepared, tried to ignore the growing attention. The video from outside the library had gone viral, spawned think pieces and debates about privilege and merit, and whether Emma Rodriguez was a hero or a fraud. She stopped reading the comments, stopped Googling herself, focused on the work. The night before the symposium, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario, every question they might ask, every trap they might set. At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep and started getting ready. She pulled out the gold dress, looked at it hanging in her closet, armor disguised as fashion. Then she put it back. The gold dress was for the old Emma, the one who needed expensive fabric to feel legitimate. This Emma, the one who'd faced down journalists and viral videos and conspiracy theories, didn't need costumes. She chose black pants and a simple white blouse. Professional, unadorned, real. The symposium was held at the Whitmore estate, the same venue as the gala that had started everything. Emma arrived early, before the crowds, and stood in the entrance hall remembering how it had felt that first night. The fear, the determination, the sense that she was walking into a world designed to reject her. Now it just felt like a room. Emma Rodriguez. A woman in her 60s approached, perfectly coiffed, wearing pearls that probably cost more than Emma's education. "I'm Eleanor Whitmore. I'm so glad you could join us." Emma shook her hand. "Thank you for inviting me. I've been following your story, what happened at our gala, and everything since. You've shown remarkable courage." Eleanor's eyes were sharp, assessing. "I hope you'll share that courage with us today. We need voices like yours in these conversations." "I'll do my best." The room filled gradually. Emma recognized faces from the gala, from news articles, from the social circles that ran this city. Senator Morrison and his wife, the tech CEO, the philanthropist, and there, near the back, Julian. He gave her a small nod. She didn't respond. The panel was Emma, 2 economists, a policy expert, and a CEO of a nonprofit. They sat at a table facing an audience of about 100 people. Emma's hands wanted to shake. She kept them still. The moderator, a journalist from a major network, opened with introductions. When she got to Emma, her smile was professionally neutral. And finally, Emma Rodriguez, currently a graduate student at Columbia and someone whose personal experience with economic mobility has garnered significant attention recently. Attention. That was one word for it. The discussion started with broad questions about policy and theory. The economists traded academic jargon. The policy expert cited studies. The nonprofit CEO talked about programs and initiatives. Emma listened, noting the way they discussed poverty like it was a puzzle to be solved, not a reality people lived. Then the moderator turned to her. "Emma, you've experienced both sides of this equation. What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about economic mobility?" Emma took a breath. This was it. The moment she could either retreat into safe platitudes or tell the truth that would make everyone uncomfortable. She chose uncomfortable. "That it's possible," she said clearly. "The biggest misconception is that if you just work hard enough, if you're smart enough, if you make the right choices, you can pull yourself up. But that's not how it works. Mobility isn't a ladder you climb through effort. It's a lottery you win through luck. And we've built an entire mythology around the few winners to avoid confronting the fact that the system is designed to keep most people exactly where they started." The room went silent. The economist next to her frowned. "Surely you don't believe that. You're sitting here, at Columbia, as evidence that mobility is possible." "I'm sitting here as evidence that 1 person in 1,000 gets lucky. I had the right employer at the right time who made the right bet for the wrong reasons. That's not a system. That's chance. And we shouldn't need chance to determine whether someone gets an education." "So what's the solution?" the moderator asked. "Stop asking people like me to be grateful for scraps and start asking people like you." Emma gestured at the audience. "Why you're comfortable with a system that requires most people to fail so a few can succeed." The moderator's eyebrows rose. "That's a strong accusation." "It's an observation. Look at this room. How many people here could lose everything tomorrow and actually understand what that means? Not theoretically. Actually. Could you live on minimum wage? Could you choose between rent and medical care? Could you explain to your kids why there's no food in the house?" Emma's voice was steady, but her heart was racing. You can't solve a problem you've never experienced, and you can't fix a system you benefit from staying broken. Someone in the audience started clapping. Then others joined. Not everyone. Some people looked angry, offended. But enough. Enough to matter. The nonprofit CEO leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. So what do we do? Those of us who want to help, but, as you say, benefit from the system? Stop treating us like projects. Stop funding programs that make you feel good, but don't actually change anything. Start asking the people living in poverty what they need instead of telling them what you think they need. And maybe, Emma paused, maybe consider that real change requires you to give up some of your advantage. Not all of it, just enough to make the system less rigged. The rest of the panel passed in a blur of questions and answers and debates that felt both productive and futile. Emma spoke her truth, deflected attacks disguised as curiosity, and refused to soften her message to make the audience comfortable. When it ended, she felt hollowed out, but also strangely lighter. People approached her afterward, some to congratulate, others to argue, a few to tell her she was wrong about everything. Emma handled them all with the same tired patience until she saw Vanessa Ashford working her way through the crowd. Their eyes met across the room. Vanessa's expression was cold, calculating. "Emma," she said when she finally reached her. "What a spirited performance." "Vanessa, I didn't know you were interested in economic inequality." "I'm interested in people who pretend to be something they're not." Vanessa's smile was sharp. "You gave quite a speech about being used by the system, but aren't you using it too? Taking Julian's money, attending his schools, wearing the credibility he bought you?" Emma felt the attention of nearby people, the way conversations quieted to eavesdrop. This was the trap. The moment Vanessa had been building toward. "You're right," Emma said calmly. "I am using the system. Because the alternative is letting it crush me. The difference between us is that I'm honest about it. I don't pretend I got here purely on merit. I had help. I had luck. I had someone make a bet on me that could have destroyed me but didn't. And I'm not ashamed of that, because the real shame is a system where that kind of luck is necessary in the first place." Vanessa's smile faltered. "Julian won't protect you forever. I don't need him to. I can protect myself." "We'll see." Vanessa walked away, leaving Emma standing in a circle of people who'd witnessed the exchange. Emma's hands were shaking now, adrenaline crashing, the weight of the day finally hitting her. She needed to leave, needed air, needed space. She made it to the gardens before Julian found her. "That was incredible," he said, slightly out of breath like he'd been running. "Everything you said in there, Emma, you changed minds. I watched it happen." "I made enemies too. The right enemies, the ones who are afraid of the truth." He moved closer, his expression serious. "Vanessa threatened you. I heard. I'm handling it. Stop handling things for me." "Emma?" "No, Julian, listen to me. Every time you step in, every time you protect me or defend me or handle things, you prove their point, that I'm yours, that I can't exist without you. And maybe that was true at the beginning, but it's not true anymore. I've learned enough. I'm strong enough. And I need you to step back and let me fight my own battles." Julian stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "You're right. I'm sorry. I know. You feel responsible because you started this, but it's mine now. The consequences, the opportunities, all of it. Mine." He nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll back off. But if you need me, I know where to find you." Julian left and Emma stood alone in the garden, watching the sun set over the estate. Her phone buzzed, a text from Professor Richardson. "Saw clips online. You were perfect. Come by my office Monday. We need to talk about your thesis." Another text from Eleanor Whitmore. "Thank you for your honesty. Would love to discuss ways to continue this conversation." And one from a number Emma didn't recognize. "You have no idea what you've started, but you will." Emma stared at the last message, feeling ice settle in her stomach. A threat, clear and direct. She should tell Julian, should call campus security, should do something. Instead, she screenshot the message, saved it to a folder she was building, and added it to the growing list of things she was keeping track of. Because this wasn't over. The symposium had been a battle, not the war. And Emma was learning that in wars, you needed more than courage. You needed strategy. You needed allies. You needed to know exactly who wanted you destroyed and why. Emma walked back through the estate. past the ballroom where she'd danced with Julian, past the entrance where she'd first walked in wearing gold and fear. She called a car, rode back to her apartment, and spent the rest of the night organizing her notes. Names, connections, threats, opportunities. She was building a map of the world she'd stumbled into. And when the next attack came, because it would come, she'd be ready. The system had made her visible. Now she'd make herself dangerous. The attack came 3 days later, but not from the direction Emma expected. She was in Professor Richardson's office, discussing her thesis proposal on systemic barriers to economic mobility, when his assistant knocked with unusual urgency. "Professor, there's someone here from the university's ethics board. They need to speak with Ms. Rodriguez immediately." Emma's stomach dropped. Richardson's expression darkened. "Send them in." The woman who entered was in her 50s, carrying a leather portfolio with the university seal embossed on it. Her face was professionally blank in that way that meant bad news was coming. "Ms. Rodriguez? I'm Dean Patricia Hoffman from the Office of Academic Integrity. We've received a formal complaint regarding your admission to Columbia and the circumstances of your scholarship funding." Emma's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. "What kind of complaint?" "An anonymous source has provided evidence suggesting that your application materials contain false information and that your scholarship was procured through inappropriate personal relationships rather than academic merit." Dean Hoffman opened her portfolio, pulled out documents Emma recognized immediately. Her application, her transcripts, letters of recommendation, all marked with red annotations. These letters were written by individuals with financial ties to Julian Valente. Your employment history lists you as an executive assistant when our source claims you were actually employed as household staff. And your personal essay discusses overcoming economic hardship while omitting that you've been receiving financial support from Mr. Valente for over a year. Richardson stood. "This is absurd. Emma's qualifications are legitimate. I reviewed her application myself. I'm not questioning her qualifications, Professor. I'm questioning the ethics of how those qualifications were presented and funded." Dean Hoffman's gaze returned to Emma. "We take academic integrity very seriously. Until this matter is resolved, your enrollment is suspended pending investigation." The word suspended hit Emma like a physical blow. "You're kicking me out? We're pausing your enrollment while we verify the accuracy of your application materials and determine whether there was any misconduct in the admissions process. How long will that take?" "These investigations typically require 4 to 6 weeks. You'll be notified." 4 to 6 weeks? Emma's voice rose despite herself. "I have finals in 3 weeks. I have a thesis proposal due. You're destroying my entire semester because of an anonymous complaint? I understand your frustration, but the process is designed to protect the university, not the students." Emma stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "Someone with money and connections made a phone call, and you're treating it like gospel without even asking for my side of the story." Dean Hoffman's expression hardened. "Ms. Rodriguez, your attitude isn't helping your case." "My attitude? My attitude is that I worked my entire life to get here, and you're taking it away because someone, probably someone who wants me gone, lied to you." Emma grabbed her bag. "You want to investigate? Fine. Investigate. But you should know that everything in my application is true. I did overcome economic hardship. I do deserve to be here. And when you figure out that this complaint is revenge disguised as concern, I'll expect an apology." She walked out before Dean Hoffman could respond, before Richardson could stop her, before the tears burning behind her eyes could fall. Outside, the campus looked the same as always. Students walking to class, studying on the lawn, living their lives like the world wasn't actively trying to crush certain people for daring to climb. Emma pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called the only person who might understand what was happening. Julian answered on the first ring. "Emma, they suspended me. The university. Someone filed a complaint about my application and my scholarship. They're investigating." Silence. Then, "Vanessa, can you prove it?" "I can find out. Give me an hour." Emma hung up and started walking with no destination in mind. She ended up at the coffee shop where she'd first confronted Julian about his manipulations, about the bet that had started everything. She ordered coffee she didn't drink and sat at the same table, feeling like the past 6 months had been a fever dream that was finally breaking. Her phone buzzed constantly. texts from Professor Richardson offering support, emails from classmates who'd somehow already heard about the suspension, a voicemail from her mother asking if everything was okay because she'd seen something online about Emma in Columbia. Emma ignored all of it except one message, this one from Eleanor Whitmore. I heard about the ethics complaint. This is unconscionable. Please call me. Emma called.
My dear, are you all right?
Eleanor's voice was warm, concerned, real. Not really, but I'm functional. I want you to know that I've already contacted the university president. What they're doing is a disgrace. You spoke truth at the symposium and now you're being punished for it. You think this is because of the symposium?
I think it's because you made powerful people uncomfortable.
And uncomfortable people lash out. Eleanor paused. Emma, I've been in this world long enough to know how it works. The complaint is likely fabricated or exaggerated, but the investigation will be real and it will be designed to find something wrong even if nothing is. You need legal representation. I can't afford. I'm not asking you to pay. I'm offering to connect you with someone who handles these cases. Someone good. Will you let me help? Emma thought about Julian's warnings to watch who she trusted, thought about how every offer of help came with strings attached, but she also thought about fighting this battle alone versus fighting it with resources. Yes, thank you. Good, I'll have someone contact you within the hour. And Emma, don't let them break you. You're exactly where you belong. The lawyer Eleanor sent was named Miranda Chen, no relation to Professor Richardson's colleague, and she looked like she ate ethics boards for breakfast. They met at her office in Midtown, a space that smelled like expensive coffee and competence. I've reviewed the complaint, Miranda said, sliding a document across her desk. It's vague on specifics, but heavy on insinuation. Classic character assassination disguised as concern for academic integrity. Emma read through the complaint, her jaw tightening with each line. Someone had gone through her entire history with a microscope, twisting facts just enough to make them sound damning. Her job as a housemaid became misrepresenting employment status. Julian's scholarship became inappropriate financial relationships affecting admissions decisions. Her success at the Gala became using personal connections to gain unfair advantages. This is Vanessa, Emma said. It has to be. Probably, but we can't prove it without discovery, and that takes time. Miranda leaned back in her chair. Here's the reality. The university will drag this out as long as they can. They don't want the publicity of defending a scholarship student against a wealthy complainant, but they also don't want to look like they're bowing to pressure. So they'll investigate thoroughly, find some minor discrepancy to hang their hat on, and then offer you a deal. What kind of deal? Probably a warning instead of expulsion, maybe some restrictions on your scholarship, a note in your file about ethical concerns. Enough to satisfy the complainant without completely destroying you. Emma's hands clenched. That's not good enough. A note in my file follows me forever. It undermines everything I accomplish here. I know, which is why we're not taking that deal. Miranda's smile was sharp. We're going on offense. I want to file a counter-complaint against the university for discriminatory investigation practices. We'll argue that you're being targeted because of your socioeconomic background, that the university is holding you to a different standard than students from wealthy families. Will that work? It'll make them very uncomfortable, especially if we go public with it. The optics of a prestigious university investigating a first-generation student for receiving the same kind of support wealthy students get from their families? That's a PR nightmare they'll want to avoid. Emma thought about the viral video, about the articles, about becoming even more visible than she already was. If we go public, it gets worse before it gets better. Probably. But right now, they're controlling the narrative. We take that control back. We change the story from student under investigation to university targets success story. Which headline do you think plays better? Emma looked at Miranda, at this woman who was offering her weapons instead of sympathy. Let's do it. The story broke 2 days later. Not because Miranda leaked it, though she was prepared to, but because someone at the university did. The headline read, Columbia investigates student who challenged elite at economic symposium. The article connected Emma's suspension to her speech at the Whitmore Foundation, painted it as retaliation disguised as ethics enforcement. The response was immediate and intense. Social media erupted. Students organized protests. Faculty members wrote open letters defending Emma's character and qualifications. Even some of Emma's classmates, including Sophie, surprisingly, posted their support. But the backlash was equally fierce. Think pieces questioned whether Emma had manipulated her way into Columbia. Conservative outlets used her story as evidence that affirmative action and economic diversity initiatives were corrupting academic standards. Vanessa's friends went on record defending the investigation as necessary oversight. Emma watched it all from her apartment, suspended from classes, but somehow more present in Columbia's consciousness than she had ever been as an actual student. Her phone rang constantly, journalists wanting statements, supporters offering solidarity, and through it all, one person who didn't call, Julian. She finally reached out to him on day 5 of the media circus. "Why haven't you said anything?" she asked when he answered. "Because you asked me to step back, to let you fight your own battles. This is different. This is exactly what you predicted would happen. Vanessa attacking, the system protecting its own, you being forced to prove your worth over and over again." Julian's voice was tired. "I could make a statement, could threaten the university with lawsuits or withdrawn donations, could make this whole thing disappear with a few phone calls. But that proves their point, doesn't it? That you need me, that you can't exist in this world without my protection." Emma closed her eyes, hating that he was right. "So what do I do?" "You win the investigation. You prove every word in your application was true. And you make them regret ever questioning you in the first place. And if I can't, then we burn the whole thing down together. But Emma, I don't think you need me for that anymore." The investigation dragged on for 3 weeks. Emma cooperated fully, provided every document they requested, sat through interviews where Dean Hoffman asked the same question 17 different ways, looking for inconsistencies. Miranda was with her for every session, objecting to inappropriate questions, creating a record of the university's overreach. Meanwhile, the counter-complaint gained traction. Student groups demanded answers. Faculty Senate meetings grew heated. The university president, a man named Robert Hastings, who Emma had never met, suddenly knew her name and wanted this resolved quietly. That's when Marcus resurfaced. He showed up at Emma's apartment unannounced, which was becoming a disturbing pattern with Julian's associates. Emma considered not answering the door. Then she thought about her growing file of information, about the map she was building of who connected to whom, and let him in. "You're either brave or stupid," Marcus said, standing in her tiny living room looking completely out of place. "I haven't decided which." "What do you want, Marcus?" "To give you something you need. Information." He pulled out his phone, showed her a series of text messages. They were between Vanessa and someone named Richard Ashford, her father, Emma guessed. The messages discussed the ethics complaint, how to phrase it, which university officials were sympathetic to their concerns. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Julian asked me to help you, and because—" Marcus paused, looking almost uncomfortable. "You were right. About all of it. At the symposium, when you talked about the system being designed to keep people in their place. You were right, and we were wrong. And this," he gestured at his phone, "this is proof that Vanessa orchestrated the whole thing." Emma stared at the messages, at the evidence she needed. "How did you get these?" "Vanessa's assistant is dating my assistant. People talk, especially when they're angry about being used to destroy someone's life." Marcus sent the screenshots to Emma's phone. "Use them. End this." "Why are you really helping me?" Marcus met her eyes. "Because that night of the gala, when we made that bet, I saw you as a joke, as entertainment, and you've spent the past 6 months proving that I was the joke, that all of us were. You're better than this world deserves, Emma, and maybe helping you is how I start being less of an asshole." He left before Emma could respond. She forwarded the messages to Miranda immediately. The lawyer called back within minutes. "This is gold, absolute gold. Written evidence of coordination between the complainant and her family to target you specifically. We can use this to end the investigation immediately." "How?" "I present it to Dean Hoffman tomorrow morning. Give the university a choice. Drop the investigation and issue a public apology, or we go public with evidence that they allowed themselves to be used as weapons in a personal vendetta. What do you think they'll choose?" Emma thought about Vanessa, about the cruelty disguised as concern, about systems designed to protect people like her from people like Emma. They'll choose to protect themselves. Exactly. Pack your bags, Emma. You're going back to class. The meeting happened in President Hastings' office, not Dean Hoffman's. That alone told Emma everything about how seriously they were taking Miranda's threat. Hastings was 70, distinguished, and currently looking like he'd aged a decade since this whole thing started. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "I want to begin by apologizing for the distress this investigation has caused you. Distress is an interesting word for destroying my semester and my reputation." Miranda put a hand on Emma's arm, a silent message to let her handle this. "President Hastings, my client appreciates your apology, but we're here to discuss resolution, not platitudes. You've seen the evidence of coordination between Vanessa Ashford and her family to weaponize your ethics process. What are you prepared to do about it?" Hastings glanced at Dean Hoffman, who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. "The investigation is being terminated immediately. Ms. Rodriguez's suspension is lifted effective today. Her academic record will show no indication that any of this occurred." "Not good enough," Miranda said. "We also want a public statement from the university acknowledging that the investigation was initiated based on false allegations and affirming Ms. Rodriguez's qualifications and standing." "That could expose us to what? Accountability? You allowed your institution to be used as a weapon in a personal conflict. You owe Ms. Rodriguez more than just letting her back into classes she should never have been removed from." Hastings was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Fine. We'll issue a statement. But Ms. Rodriguez," he looked at Emma directly, "I hope you understand that this has been difficult for everyone involved." Emma stood, Miranda rising with her. "No, President Hastings. It's been difficult for me. You've been inconvenienced. There's a difference." They walked out before he could respond. Outside the administration building, Emma finally let herself feel it. The relief, the anger, the exhaustion of fighting battles she shouldn't have had to fight in the first place. Miranda put a hand on her shoulder. "You did good in there, held your ground without burning bridges." "I wanted to burn them all." "I know, but you're smarter than that. You're thinking long-term now." Miranda handed Emma her card. "If you ever need representation again, and knowing your trajectory, you might call me. No charge. Consider it my contribution to making this system slightly less terrible." Emma took the card, slipped it into her pocket. "Thank you. For everything. Thank Eleanor Whitmore. She's the one who called me." Miranda smiled. "Though, between us, you're the most interesting case I've had in years. I hope I get to see what you do next." Emma returned to classes the next day. The statement from the university had already gone out, carefully worded to acknowledge the investigation was baseless without quite admitting fault. It was typical institutional cowardice, but it was enough. Professor Richardson caught her after class, pulled her aside. "Welcome back. Your thesis proposal is approved, by the way. Let's get you graduated." "Just like that? After everything?" "Just like that. The work speaks for itself, Emma. It always did. The rest was just noise." He paused. "Though I have to say, you handled that noise better than most tenured professors would have. You've got a future in this field, if you want it." Emma thought about that, about a future in economics, in academia, in rooms where policy was made and systems were maintained. "I'm not sure I want to spend my life in rooms where people debate poverty without understanding it." "Then change the rooms. Or build new ones. You've already proven you can do impossible things. Why stop now?" The semester ended with Emma taking her finals alongside everyone else. As if the past month of investigation and suspension and public scrutiny had been a nightmare she could wake up from. Her grades came back, all A's, including Professor Richardson's class, where she'd written a final paper on how economic mobility metrics were designed to make failure look like success. She called her mother to share the news. "Baby, I'm so proud of you. After everything they put you through, you still did it." "I had help, Mama. A lot of help." "You also had strength. Don't forget that part. You could have quit, could have come home, but you stayed and fought. That's all you, Emma." After they hung up, Emma sat in her apartment looking at the acceptance letter to Columbia's PhD program that had arrived that morning. A full ride. Research funding, the chance to spend the next 5 years studying the system she'd survived. She should have been excited. Instead, she felt hollow. Her phone rang. "Julian. Congratulations on finishing the semester. And on the PhD acceptance, how did you already know about that? Richardson may have mentioned it. He's hoping you'll accept. Are you? Julian was quiet. I'm hoping you'll do whatever makes you happy, even if that means leaving all of this behind. I've been thinking about that, actually, about what I really want versus what I think I should want. Emma stood, walked to her window, looked out at the city. I don't want to spend 5 more years studying poverty. I want to fix it, or at least try. How? I don't know yet, but I know it's not going to happen in a PhD program or a policy think tank or any of the traditional paths people like me are supposed to be grateful for. She paused. I think I need to build something new, something that actually helps people instead of just researching them. That's ambitious, also expensive, and difficult, and likely to fail. I know, but at least it would be mine. My choice. My risk. Julian was quiet for so long Emma thought he'd hung up. Then, what if you didn't have to do it alone? What do you mean? I mean, I have resources, connections, experience building things. And maybe I've been looking for a reason to do something that actually matters, instead of just making money for people who already have too much of it. Emma's heart kicked. You want to go into business with me? I want to go into purpose with you. There's a difference. His voice was careful, uncertain in a way she'd never heard from him before. These past months, watching you fight and survive and refuse to be broken, Emma, you've changed the way I see everything, the way I see myself. And I don't want to go back to who I was before I met you. Julian, I'm not asking for anything. Not a relationship, not ownership of whatever you build, not gratitude for helping. I'm asking for a chance to be part of something real, to use what I have in service of something that actually deserves it, which, as it turns out, is you and whatever vision you have for fixing broken systems. Emma closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten for the first time since the investigation ended. I don't even have a plan yet, so we'll make one. Together. As partners. If you'll have me. The conversation drifted into possibilities. What if they created a foundation that actually worked the way foundations claim to, by listening to communities instead of imposing solutions? What if they built pathways to education that didn't require luck, or bets, or rich benefactors? What if they took everything Emma had learned about navigating elite spaces and used it to open doors for others? They talked for 2 hours, ideas building on ideas, until Emma's apartment filled with the kind of hope she'd forgotten was possible. That hope led to action. 3 months later, Emma and Julian stood in an empty warehouse in Brooklyn, looking at a space that would become the first location of the Foundation for Economic Justice and Education. Not a charity, not a handout program. An actual organization built by people who understood poverty because they'd lived it, funded by people who understood wealth because they'd benefited from it. Eleanor Whitmore had donated the space. Marcus had connected them with grants. Professor Richardson had helped design the curriculum. Even Vanessa, in a twisted way, had contributed. Her attack had made Emma visible enough that when she and Julian announced their partnership, people paid attention. The foundation would offer free business courses taught by actual entrepreneurs, mentorship programs that matched students with professionals in their fields of interest, legal aid for people fighting discriminatory systems. And most importantly, it would be run by people who'd survived those systems, not people who studied them from a distance. This is bigger than I imagined, Emma said, her voice echoing in the empty space. That's because you're thinking too small. We can open 10 of these, 20. Make it a national model. Julian stood next to her, close but not touching, their relationship still undefined but undeniably important. Unless you're having second thoughts, I have all the thoughts. Second, third, fourth. I'm terrified this will fail, that will disappoint people, that I'll prove Vanessa and everyone else right about me not deserving any of this. Emma turned to face him. But I'm more terrified of not trying, of playing it safe and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Julian smiled, and it was real. Not the controlled, careful expression he wore in business meetings, but something genuine. Then let's be terrified together. They worked 18-hour days getting the foundation ready to open. Emma insisted on doing as much of the physical labor as possible, painting walls, assembling furniture, proving to herself that she hadn't forgotten where she came from. Julian worked alongside her, often badly, his expensive clothes covered in paint and dust. "You're terrible at this," Emma said one afternoon, watching him struggle with a bookshelf that refused to cooperate. "I'm excellent at writing checks. Let me do that part." "No. You wanted to be part of building something real. This is what real looks like. Messy, frustrating, manual." He threw the screwdriver down in defeat. "I think I prefer hostile takeovers. At least those make sense." Emma laughed, and the sound surprised her. When had she started laughing again? When had the weight she'd been carrying become bearable? The foundation opened on a Saturday in September, exactly 1 year after Emma had walked into the Whitmore Gala wearing gold and fear. The space was packed with people from the neighborhood, curious students, journalists who'd followed Emma's story, and allies who believed in what they were building. Emma stood at the front of the room, no podium, no prepared remarks, just her and the truth. "A year ago, I was invisible. I worked in places like this, cleaning them, serving people who never saw me as fully human. I was taught that my place was to stay quiet, work hard, and be grateful for scraps. And then something happened that forced me into visibility. It was ugly and manipulative and turned me into a bet between men who saw me as entertainment. But it also gave me something I didn't have before. A platform. A voice. A chance to say that the way we treat people who are struggling is broken, and we can do better." Yantachibasa. She paused, looking at the faces watching her. "This foundation isn't about charity. It's not about feeling good or checking boxes. It's about building actual pathways for people who've been told there's no path for them. It's about creating opportunities that don't require luck, or knowing the right person, or winning some cosmic lottery. It's about looking at broken systems and saying, we're not going to study them anymore. We're going to replace them." The applause was thunderous. Emma looked back at Julian, who stood against the wall watching with an expression she couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe. Or hope. Or something else entirely. After the speeches and the tours and the endless handshakes, after everyone had left and it was just Emma and Julian in the quiet space, he finally spoke what had been building between them for months. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it without obligations or expectations attached." Emma's pulse quickened. "Okay, I'm in love with you. Not with the idea of you or the project you represent or any of that. With you. The real you who's terrible at asking for help and brilliant at dismantling arguments and brave in ways I'll never understand." Julian's voice was steady, but his eyes were vulnerable. "I know the timing is complicated. I know we're business partners and there's a power dynamic and 100 reasons this is a bad idea. But I also know I can't keep pretending that working with you is enough when what I want is everything." Emma's breath caught. She'd felt it too, the shift from professional to personal, from partnership to something deeper. But she'd buried it under practicality and fear, and the belief that men like Julian didn't actually love women like her. They collected them. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "How to be with someone who's seen me at my worst, who knows all my weaknesses, who was there for all the ugly, desperate parts. Those aren't weaknesses, Emma. That's just being human. And I don't want the polished version you show the world. I want the woman who told off a reporter, who refused to play safe, who chose to build something impossible because possible wasn't good enough." He stepped closer. "But if you don't feel the same way, if this is just business for you, I need to know now. Because I can be your partner. But I can't keep being your partner while pretending I don't want more." Emma thought about all the ways this could go wrong. About power dynamics and public perception, and the very real possibility that loving someone from Julian's world would compromise her independence. But she also thought about the past year, about fighting alongside him, about how he'd learned to step back when she needed space and show up when she needed support. "I love you too," she said, the words feeling both terrifying and right. "And I have no idea if this will work, but I want to try." Julian kissed her, gentle and asking permission even as he gave it. Emma kissed him back, letting herself feel without analyzing, letting herself want without justifying. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "So what now?" Julian asked. "Now we finish what we started. We make this foundation work. We help people who need it. We prove that the system can be changed if enough people refuse to accept it as it is." Emma took his hand, "And we do it together, as equals, as partners, as whatever we're becoming." That sounds terrifying and perfect. Welcome to my entire life. The foundation grew faster than either of them expected. Within 6 months, they'd served 500 people. Within a year, they'd opened 2 more locations. Emma's story became less about her and more about the work, which was exactly what she wanted. She finished her master's degree and declined the PhD program, choosing lived experience over academic credentials. Julian stepped back from most of his business dealings, focusing his energy and resources on the foundation. He sold his estate, moved into something smaller, started living like someone who valued purpose over prestige. Some of his old associates called him a fool. Others called him a traitor to his class. Julian stopped caring what they called him. Marcus ended up joining the foundation's board, using his connections to open doors that would have stayed closed otherwise. Even Sophie showed up one day asking if she could volunteer. Emma said yes, cautiously, and watched the girl from the designer bags learn what actual work looked like. Vanessa never apologized, never acknowledged what she'd done. But 2 years after the foundation opened, Emma received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note that said simply, "You were right. I was cruel. This doesn't fix it, but maybe it helps someone else." Emma deposited the check and used it to fund scholarships. She didn't respond to the note. Some bridges stayed burned. The foundation's 5th anniversary celebration happened in the same warehouse where it had started, now transformed and expanded. The room was filled with people whose lives had been changed. Students who'd gotten degrees, entrepreneurs who'd launched businesses, families who'd found pathways out of poverty. Emma stood at the front again, older now, more tired, but also more certain. 5 years ago, someone asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted to fix broken systems. And a lot of people told me that was impossible, that systems don't change, that I should be grateful for what I had and stop asking for more. She looked around the room. But here's what I've learned. Systems don't change on their own. They change because people refuse to accept them as permanent. They change because enough voices say, "This isn't good enough," and mean it. They change because someone decides that impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. She found Julian in the crowd, standing next to her mother and her siblings who'd flown in for the celebration. He gave her a small nod, a gesture that said everything without words. This foundation exists because people believed in something that didn't exist yet. And that's the lesson I want to leave you with. You don't have to accept the world as it is. You can build something better. It won't be easy. It won't be smooth. You'll face people who want you to fail because your success threatens their comfort. But you'll also find allies in unexpected places. You'll discover strengths you didn't know you had. And you'll learn that the system isn't as solid as it pretends to be. The applause was deafening. Emma stepped off the stage and was immediately surrounded by people wanting to thank her, to share their stories, to tell her what the foundation had meant to them. She listened to each one, remembering when she'd been on the other side of opportunity, hoping someone would see her potential. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the warehouse was quiet again, Emma and Julian stood where they'd stood 5 years ago, looking at what they'd built. "Did you ever imagine it would turn into this?" Julian asked. "No, I thought we'd help maybe 100 people, maybe prove a point. I didn't think we'd actually start changing things. We haven't changed everything. The system is still broken in most places." "I know, but we changed it here. For these people. And maybe they'll change it somewhere else, and maybe that's how it actually works. Not one grand revolution, but 1,000 small refusals to accept things as they are." Julian pulled her close, and Emma let herself lean into him. They'd gotten married the year before, a small ceremony with just family and close friends. No gala, no spectacle. Just 2 people who'd learned that love was built through showing up, even when it was hard. "What do you think comes next?" he asked. Emma thought about the expansion plans they'd been discussing, about the political pressure to scale back their more radical programs, about the constant battle to prove that helping people wasn't the same as enabling them, about all the work still left to do. More of this. Better versions of this. Until we run out of energy or someone builds something even better. She looked up at him. "You regret any of it?" "Not a single moment. Even the parts where you were absolutely impossible." "I'm still impossible." "I know. It's one of your best qualities." They stood in the quiet, in the space they'd created, surrounded by evidence that impossible things could happen when people refused to accept the word no. Emma thought about the girl she'd been, invisible and afraid, cleaning floors in Julian's mansion and dreaming of something more. That girl would never have believed this future was possible. But possible, Emma had learned, was just a matter of who got to decide what counted. She'd decided. And in deciding, she'd changed everything. Not perfectly, not smoothly, not without cost or pain or moments when she'd wanted to quit and disappear back into safety. But she'd done it. And in doing it, she'd proven that the system wasn't inevitable. That power could be redistributed. That people dismissed as invisible could become impossible to ignore. The foundation would continue, would grow and evolve and face new challenges. Emma and Julian would face them together, partners in every sense of the word, building something that mattered more than money or status or any of the things they'd both been taught to value. And somewhere, another girl was working a job that made her invisible, reading books on her lunch break, dreaming of something more. Emma couldn't reach that girl directly, but she'd built a door, and she'd left it open. The rest was up to the dreamers who came after.